Final Work, presented by Ingrid Daniela Tosa Delgado, code 1063A13004, presented to Claudia Patricia Munera, course Pre-Intermediate English 551010, Group 11, Universidad Nacional Abierta y a Distancia, UNAD, December 2016. Introduction. The following video is part of the final work of the Pre-Intermediate English course belonging to UNAD. In the video you can see the answers to questions proposed by the activity guide of the course, which revolve around the history or reading, in this case room 13. 1. Does the history have a theme? The reading or history is about the event of the room 13 of hotel. 2. What is the history about? The story is about a writer who was writing a book about Denmark history, and he takes a specific place, the Viborg City, that years ago was consumed by a fire. When he starts to investigate, he stays in an hotel, and when arriving the night begins to happen strange things. When he begins to investigate, he finds in papers that people didn't want a monk called Nicholas Franke because they say who was a bad man and was a magician. But to the character begins to happen strange things that make him to feel like crazy, when in the end there are discovery of something frightening. 3. What is the central idea? The idea starts with the investigation of a city. The plot basically revolves around what happens in a hotel room, in this case room number 13. 4. Is it implicit or explicit? The opinion is explicit, because with the title of reading we know that what we are going to read is something that happened in a room number 13. Just a history tells things in a clear way, where we can imagine or transport us to the history and know how things happened. Example of it is that the moment the character leaves the seaward, in the reading clearly tells us that Mr. Anderson lived at one on the end of the window. Another is the part where it explains how was the shadow, the appearance of the person from room number 30, and the appearance of arm and fingernails when it was seen in the moment that magician opens the door. 5. Who is the protagonist of this story? The development of the history is told about what happens to Mr. Anderson in the hotel, so it is deduced that he is the protagonist of the history. 6. Try to establish his or her age, family background, social class and status, and occupation. To establish his age, I think that he is an adult but not of advanced age. This for the subject of the word Mr. Anderson, that shows us that he is not a young, and that according to the work that he performs, he can be an elderly person. I can also say that he must be a middle class people because he stayed in an old hotel and didn't do it in a 5-star hotel. About his occupation, the reading say that he's a writer, but he also works the research part. 7. What is the problem presented in the history? First, the history is about the investigation of a city, but the problematics come from the situation or events that happen in a hotel where the characters stay. Extreme situations like disappearance of objects or the change the place of these, strange noises in a room like steps and buzzes, and also strange shadows. 8. How was the problem solved at the end? In the end, the character tells the landlord about strange things that he had seen, and at that moment there is a strange and wild noise, something that unleashes the curiosity of the character, the landlord, and a neighbor, for know who is, where the terrifying things begin to happen. At the end, find documents with strange letters, where through the investigation of the character, he can be deduced who is the person who produced those noises and how the papers were writing. 9. At what point in this story is the tension highest? The highest tension occurs when the character tells the landlord about the strange things that he had seen, where at that moment start to produce weird noises that frighten the character, the landlord, and the neighbor, something that unleashes the curiosity, and with this situation they reveal the strange things that have happened to each one. And at that moment opens the door of room 13 and comes out a thin arm covered with grey hairs and a long dirty fingernails. 10. Is that the dramatic climax? The story begins with an investigate emphasis where the character wants to know the history of a city called Viborg. But as time passes, the climax of the story takes a dramatic and terrific emphasis where the character doesn't know what happens and thinks that he's crazy by the strange situations that happen to him, like the sign of shadows and listen of the strange noises. 11. Does the story involve an epiphany or moment of insight revelation or self-realization for the protagonist or for the reader? This is a moment of epiphany and revelation where the protagonist only needs to investigate but ends up finding answer to a strange history that happened some time ago in the city and that has to live away very nearly. 12. How is this moment presented? The protagonist is only going to investigate the story of a city where by means of time registers he sees that people talk about a magician called Nicholas Franken, and curious that habitants didn't want the magician. The character is very interested in this story and wants to continue investigating, but there are not many records about this topic. But Edward begins to live from his hotel strange situations that make him feel like crazy, where in the end the character can deduce that what happened to him was made by the bad magician, and wherein in addition the people of hotel find in the floor of a room a series of papers written with a strange ink and strange writing. Thank you very much.